Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh, and I'm here with my under-the-weather co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman from Beit Shemesh.
Yes. I see you won't be hearing me for so much today, but Josh will do a great job without me.
Israel is unplugged, and that means that where you're over here, you're going to get the unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process, focusing primarily on the ingathering of the exiles. This show is going to be a little bit different than all of our previous shows. Most of our shows deal with the why one should make Aliyah, the Torah sources of why one should consider moving to the land of Israel today. And this show is going to be different in that we're going to be bringing on a guest, and we're going to be discussing an article that was written by this guest. The guest is going to be Rabbi Elchanan Poupko. Rabbi Poupko is an 11th generation rabbi, and he is the founding editor of the YU Lamdan, the Wilf Campus Torah Journal, and the president of Eitan, the American Israeli Jewish Network. He also served as the rabbinic intern at the Park East Synagogue in New York. He holds a master's degree in Jewish education from Yeshiva University. Rabbi Poupko is committed to the cause of Israelis in the United States and is a proud member of the American Israeli community and speaks fluent Hebrew and English. His organization, Eitan, which again is the American Israeli Jewish Network, their mission, according to their website, is to strengthen, enhance, and advance Jewish identification among Israeli Americans living in the United States. The Israeli American Jewish Network does so by helping connect American Israelis with existing Jewish American institutions, networking, and engagement in events, making Jewish learning opportunities available and supporting them through Jewish life cycles and time-related events such as weddings, bar mitzvahs, holidays, and more. We're looking forward to speaking to Rabbi Poupko after the break, and we would love for you to join us. We're going to be discussing his article in the Times of Israel, Will Israelis Consider Diaspora Jews When Voting? This is an article which I believe is very critical of Israel, and therefore I think that we should go through it and discuss it, and stay tuned. This is going to be a heated one.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim. And as we promised in the beginning, we are here to discuss an article which was published in the Times of Israel entitled, Will Israelis Consider Diaspora Jews When Voting? It was written by a New York-based rabbi, Rabbi Elchanan Poupko. And we're in the process of trying to get him on the line. And we wanted to go through this article and discuss it. Rabbi Poupko, I know for his family for many decades, and he's coming on now. I'm getting our producer is writing that he is ready. Rabbi on?
Yeah, hi.
Rabbi Poupko. Shalom Aleichem, how are you?
Aleichem Shalom, Baruch Hashem, very good.
You're able to hear me?
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. So we brought you on the air in order to discuss your most recent article called in the Times of Israel called "Will Israelis Consider Diaspora Jews When Voting?" We already went through a whole introduction of you. We read your bio and we read the mission of your organization, Eitan, and I was just about to say that I have a personal connection because of your grandfather, who was one of the founders of my elementary school, Hill Academy of Pittsburgh, and he was also the national vice president of the Rabbinical Council of America, as well as the national president of the Religious Zionists of America. So you have very, very good yichus, and we've had you on my show before, and we're happy to have you on this show. We learned something from the parashios that we're in right now about how brothers should get along. Right, we're talking about Yosef. We speak about the brothers, and they had their fallout, but in the end, they all united. And this is very important. I think that when we have issues with what our Jewish brothers are saying across the pond or wherever they might be, even here in Israel, we should discuss these issues. And I think that you wrote this very critical article. I was a little bit surprised by how critical it was of Israel. And I think that I'd like to discuss it. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. But first of all, let me thank you for the terrific work you do in bringing brothers together and connecting the different sides of the pond and making sure that, as they say in Hatikva, Ein LeZion Sophia, that no matter what happens, everyone has their eyes on Zion and is looking upwards towards Eretz Yisrael. And I thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I also want to mention that I have my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, on the line. He is a little bit under the weather, so he's not going to be talking too much, but he's welcome to pipe in whatever he feels it's necessary. So he's also on the air.
Okay.
All right. Terrific.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So the best way to do so, I'm just going to start reading through the article, if that's all right with you, and I'd like to comment as we go through it. And see what I have to say and see what your response is. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you wrote this article in the Times of Israel. Again, it's entitled, Will Israelis Consider Diaspora Jews When Voting? I would say an innocuous sort of title. I mean, I didn't think much of it when I read the title. But then I started getting to the meat and potatoes of the article, and I have to say that I was getting hot under the collar the more I read of it, because, like I said, it definitely is that you'll agree that it's a very critical article of Israel and Israeli policy.
Yeah, it is, and I think another person that I quoted in the article is someone who does a lot of work in terms of reaching out to the French community, French Aliyah. I think he also had some very strong feelings on this. And just in general, over the past half a year, 8 months, with the closure of the airport in Israel, with the disconnect between Israel and the diaspora, there have been many hard feelings, whether it's people who tried to come because they had children who were chayalim bodedim, people who were stuck in the aliyah process, and just people who felt that there wasn't much of interest in the different crises that were taking place in the diaspora. I think all those generated hard feelings, even from people who've been working on building stronger connections with Israel for years.
So, Rabbi Poupko, I just wanted to mention that we have the way that this show is created is that we have 3 different segments. They're 12-minute segments each. We're in the first of those segments right now, and we have hard breaks in between. So, as we're talking, we might have to go to a break, but we'll be right back in a few minutes. We'll let you know when we're going to those breaks, and if you could just hold on with us, that would be great. So, let me start the article. It says, now that Israel is going for elections, will an Israeli party running for Knesset entirely dedicated to helping Jews in the diaspora get 5 to 6 seats in the Knesset in this coming election? Just 3 months ago, the shocking headline screamed, quote, only 4% of American Jews consider Israel most important voting issue, end quote. The damning information was not about American Jews not considering Israel when voting, which most of us do. It was about us having selfishly sunk so low that only 4% would consider Israel the most important issue. Sadly, there are times it appears that not only are diaspora Jews not on the minds of Israeli voters, but they are a political liability. At no time has this become as clear as during this past year. So let's start off with that. I mean, this applies actually to the whole article as I was reading through it. I grew up in a Zionist community in Pittsburgh. Your grandfather, Zichrono Livrocha, was an integral part of it. And, you know, when I was growing up, I was taught to support Israel, not because I'm expecting something back from it. I'll say even more so. In generations prior to our generation, there were many generations even before the creation of the State of Israel that were helping Jews in Israel, not without an Israeli government, without expecting any sort of political reciprocity or anything, you know, that they were expecting in return. They were just helping Israel because they knew that was the right thing to do, and that's what Jews are supposed to do wherever they are. Your response?
So yeah, absolutely. You know, I believe that Jews need to help people in Israel no matter what, and that's what I noted in my article. There are two very big differences, though, between back then and now. In 1948, there were 600,000 Jews living in Israel, and more than 5 million Jews living in the U.S. You know, that's very different right now. The almost majority of the Jewish people are living in Israel. And so I think that's one thing that has changed. You know, Israel is not in the situation where they're fighting for their very existence every day. Sure, there are many major threats, but in a situation where diaspora Jewry is becoming so much smaller compared to Israeli Jews, I think that also shifts responsibility. So when you were growing up, you know, you were the big brother, and the majority of Jews were in the United States, but that changed now. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing I was referring to was not necessarily whether diaspora Jews are asking for something in return, but rather the phenomenon, which is unfortunate, but you know, it's politics, of people in Israel, living in Israel, expressing negative views of diaspora Jews just because of their politics.
And we'll get to that further in the article. Hopefully we'll get to that part as well.
Right.
Good.
So if someone's willing to criticize diaspora Jews for how they vote, then, you know, saying that they're not caring enough, so let them show that they care.
Okay, and I'm gonna try to make the argument that we do care, and we show that we care, and it's unfortunate that you and others aren't feeling that. Maybe we can discuss why that is, but we definitely do care. But let's continue, and again, we have 2 minutes until a hard break, just to let you know. So one cannot expect, I'm continuing to read here the article, Israeli diaspora relations should be symmetric. No one expects Israelis to be making donations to Jewish institutions in the U.S. By the way, I do. Nor does anyone expect Israelis to be sending care packages to Jews in New York. By the way, I do. We get it. Despite its astonishing success and accomplishments, Israel is located in a dangerous neighborhood. Not nearly as dangerous as Chicago or Detroit, but okay, we'll give you a pass on that one. No American Jew goes to sleep at night wondering if a midnight siren will force them and their children to the shelter or even kill them. Thousands in Israel's south do. No American Jew needs to worry about an Iranian nuclear bomb. Israelis do. Israel is a smashing success in tech, medicine, and so much more, yet real hunger and poverty remain unaddressed. I guess you haven't seen the homeless situation in L.A. No question about that, yet there is a space between not asking for material help and complete indifference. And this is where you start to get very, very critical, claiming that we are completely indifferent, that those are strong words. Wouldn't you think?
Like I said, I think that the past half a year to a year really brought those feelings up because of the disconnect, the closure of airports, and the shifting of balance. In the U.S. now, one out of every 1,000 people died from the coronavirus. Right, that's something that, thank God, is not in happening in Israel, but definitely diaspora Jewry has been hurting.
Okay, we're going to go to a hard break, and we're going to continue the article on the. And when we come back, if that's all right with you, you'll stick with us, and we'll continue right after this break.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Terrific.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Stay with.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Okay, we are back. Israel Unplugged. We're here. This is Josh Wander, and I'm here with Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, my co-host, and Rabbi Elchanan Poupko from New York City. And we're discussing his article that he published in the Times of Israel. And we're going to continue with the reading of that article. As Mark Eisenberg, CEO of the French Jewish organization Qualita, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, noted this past year that the outbreak of COVID-19 was the first time since Israel's establishment that the gates of Israel were closed to Jews from the diaspora. Jews who were in medical school in Israel, were Israeli citizens without passports, or stalled in the Aliyah process due to closure of government offices worldwide, were locked out of Israel, while evangelicals strolled into Israel. Being Jewish was not the right card to pull off at this time. I have to say that this is probably gets to the crux of what the article's about, and I am shocked. And you'll excuse me for saying that this is as close as you can get to the Meraglim saying that it's Eretz Ochelet et Yoshveha, that this is a land that eats its inhabitants. Accusing that intentionally the Israeli government, this is not that there's that this was done by accident or that it's just happened or that there's some sort of intentional thought out process to keep Jews from America out of Israel. Am I correct in saying that?
There's nothing more Zionist than the vision of Jews returning to Israel. And so I think over the past few months, I've put in a lot of work to help people who were either in medical school in Israel trying to get in, or people trying to make Aliyah and left out by means of bureaucracy. So I think it's quite the opposite of the Meraglim. I think that there's nothing more Zionist than that, and the fact that I'm frustrated that the gates of Israel were closed, I think is definitely just shows the value that I give it. And I don't think anyone would call the people fighting the white paper Meraglim. They were
right, but you're suggesting in some way that we're happy about this when we are just as dismayed as you are that our brothers all around the world were not able to come in. But there was you're missing the context. The context is that the Israeli government is in the middle of a pandemic, much of which was unknown and still is unknown about. And its main goal as a government, as any government around the world, is to protect its citizens. So when it comes to that, does it not make sense, a policy of closing its gates, by the way, not to just Jews, to all tourism, Christians, Muslims, Jews, everyone was closed out, and they were closed out. And don't think for a minute that it's not Israel didn't take a hit from this. Remember that a lot of the Israeli economy comes from tourism. Maybe the majority of the Israeli economy comes from tourism. So closing the gates is not an easy an easy decision to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, security. The number one job of a government is the security of its citizens, and I totally understand that. Israel needed to protect itself, and it was not clear where exactly the virus was coming from, and absolutely, there's no question about that. But the second you make exceptions for others, then it gets difficult, and the second there's a lack of political will to help, that's when you have trouble. So there were more than 70 evangelicals that, at the peak came to, I think it was to harvest or work in the vineyards in the Shomron. They strolled right in while, two people who were in medical school, Jews who were in medical school in Israel, it was impossible to get them in. The second you make exceptions, right, the second you say, well, not New York, but yes, Dubai, not this, but yes, that's when you have trouble. I think another aspect was the people who were trying to make Aliyah. You had people who had all the paperwork, and by the way, I was quoting Israeli Knesset member Eichler, who said this, that he had people who had all the documentation, that they were willing to take any test, and show any medical record, and they weren't allowed in. You had parents of Chayalim Bodedim. They weren't allowed in. You had
I just want to mention that I did reach out, and we'll get to this at the end of the show, hopefully. I did reach out to the ministries of Diaspora Affairs and Tourism, as well as Nefesh B'Nefesh, to respond to this article, and we have responses from one of the ministries and from Nefesh B'Nefesh. So just so you should be aware that we're taking this very seriously.
Thank you. It's actually, if you want to be very specific, the people in the diaspora minister or whoever were not the ones. There's something called the Reshut HaOchlusin VeHagira, and that's where really everything got stuck.
Which is under Aryeh Deri. That's the Shas party.
I don't know who it. I think it was their CEO, but he's the person who could have just lifted one tiny bureaucratic regulation that would have allowed 1,000 people to make Aliyah from North America. So if we're talking Zionism, there's no greater Zionism than smoothing that out and making sure that people who want to make Aliyah can do it.
And to suggest that the ministers here in Israel and Nefesh B'Nefesh don't have on the top of their priority list Zionism and bringing back Jews to Israel is what we're talking about here, because I think that is a terrible condemnation. I think that you're misleading people to think that this is not what they have. They have other priorities besides Jews and Zionism, which I think is completely misjustice when it comes to this. But we'll get to the details. As far as the evangelicals, I know actually very intimately about what you're speaking about. You're speaking about a group called Hayovel, run by Tommy Waller in the Shomron in Samaria. And when they were brought in, just so you should be aware, I don't know if you're aware of the whole case, but if it wasn't for Tommy Waller and his group coming in, they weren't just evangelicals that came here to pray in a church here in Israel. If it wasn't for the work that they did in the fields of Samaria, the grapes would have rotted on the vines, and Israel would have been out of that entire economy for the entire year. I mean, it's unbelievable. We owe them a debt of gratitude for the work that they came here and did. Again, I wasn't involved in the decision-making process. I don't know if I would have made that decision to accept them in and not others. But one of the things I always talk to my wife is that the difference between a bureaucracy in America, when you speak to a bureaucrat in America and you want to sort of get around the rules, you want them to bend the rules a little bit. There's no such thing, right? You speak to a bureaucrat in America, they're not bending any rules. This is the way it's written, and this is the way we're going to do it. Same thing in Europe, same thing, for those that are listening from other places in the world. When it comes to Israel, one of the things that I think is a pro, not a con, is that you can speak to people here in Israel, and when they see that there's some sort of something that's illogical, there's some problem here that needs to be attended to, and I can tell you this firsthand because I'm involved in the army with doing this exact thing. When there are cases of a closure in Israel, and there are exceptional cases where people need to not to avoid the rules, to somehow bend the rules in order to allow this exceptional case to happen, we are able to we consider these each individual case, and we apply some logic to it, not just the bureaucracy, and just say no one's allowed in, period, and we're not going to consider anything else. What are your thoughts?
And you don't think there was room for... So just let me give you an example. So let's say the month is March, April, May, June, July. And I want to make Aliyah from New York. So let me just share with you what I would need and how that could have been figured out. So what I would need is, in addition to all the different many documents, I would need an FBI clearance. So I would need to file with the FBI, get that clearance. Then I would need to get only American, not Canadian. I would need to get what's called an apostille from the State Department in Washington. Then get that certified with the consulate in New York, and then I can move forward. Now, I don't need to tell you that the FBI offices weren't open. The State Department had a backlog of 1.5 million passports on delay, and no one was able to really get things through. So there were certain things that were bureaucratic requirements without which you couldn't move forward with your Aliyah process. And so if there could have been 10 different ways to smoothen that out, saying, look, we know that the FBI offices are closed. We know that the State Department in Washington is not a trip that you can make right now. And those things could have been figured out with the political will. And so you're 100% correct that there is this ability in Israel to see to a uniqueness of a situation. But unfortunately, in this case, I think that didn't happen, and that, I think, was very frustrating to me and to others.
So very quickly, just to respond to the two accusations you just made, one of them has to do with an FBI background check. And by the way, both of these things have changed, just so you should know. There have been leniencies made in both of these cases, but you're right that there were months, like you said, that these were the absolute requirements, but you have to understand what's behind these requirements. An FBI background check was what you called a clearance, was not just to see whether this person was a nice guy or not. It was to make sure that wanted criminals do not make their way into Israel, which unfortunately has happened in the past, which we have witnessed and we've had terrible trouble with.
The story of Malka Leifer. I absolutely understand the background. There is a way, in the age of digital, figure out a way.
We have to go to a hard break again. Can we continue this on the next segment, please? Sorry to interrupt you.
All right.
Okay, stay tuned.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. I'm here with my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, and our guest, Rabbi Elchanan Poupko, discussing his most recent article in the blogs of the Times of Israel, critical of Israeli policy for ignoring diaspora Jewry when in their time of need. And Rabbi Elchanan was mentioning that perhaps this is just these are just isolated incidences with certain policies that we have issues with. This is not a systemic problem of the Israeli government, but they're just some issues that needed to be worked out. What are your thoughts?
So there's definitely the COVID confusion, and as Rabbi Elchanan pointed out, there's a lot of people didn't know what they're doing, and there's just so much about the virus we didn't know and how to treat it, and everyone was sort of clamoring, and that's absolutely understandable. I think there is also a broader sense of lack of political will, grassroots political will in Israel when it comes to diaspora. So another example would be, and I think this is where we'll get to politics, is when politicians speak about American Jewry in a denigrating way because of how they vote or who they vote for. I think that is also something that, when going uncondemned, shows sort of a lack of sensitivity. So I think politics always get tricky, but when you have a situation of people condemning American Jews for the way they vote, the example I cited was the former Knesset member Ayub Kara, who says that American Jews are traitors for voting for Joe Biden. When you have the President of the United States referring to American Jews as disloyal and other names, and no one really says anything, and if you look on social media, a lot of Israelis actually agree, that's hurtful. And so I think that's another side of this, where there's two options. Either you respect each other's politics and just say, okay, you vote the way you vote, I vote the way I vote, or when you guys have elections, so the question is, okay, so how are you guys voting on diaspora Jews? And I'd love to hear your response on this.
Sure. So before I get to that, because I don't want the show to go on without getting in these responses, I did reach out to the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. I did reach out to the Ministry of Tourism, and I also reached out to Nefesh B'Nefesh for their comments about your article. I have to admit it's my fault, not theirs, that we didn't get a better response, but I did not get a response yet from the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, but I did receive one from the Ministry of Tourism and from Nefesh B'Nefesh, and I'll just wanted to read those to you so that we get these out of the way. The Ministry of Tourism, in response to your article, says, and I'm going to read it. It was written in Hebrew, so I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then translate. B'kvot ha'itpashtut, due to the outbreak megefat corona of the coronavirus, chalu hagbalot al aknisa lemedinat Yisrael. There were certain barriers that were made in entering the state of Israel. חלק מהמגבלות כללו שלילת ויזות תייר לישראל. Some of those restrictions included stopping tourist visas coming into Israel. לכן, אלה שרצו להגיע לישראל לטובת חופשה, therefore those that wanted to come to Israel for the purpose of vacationing or etc. וכולי, לא ניתנה להם האפשרות בהתאם להנחיות משרד הפנים ומשרד הבריאות. They did not allow them to come into the country according to the policies that were set by the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Health. לצד זאת, חשוב להדגיש, that having been said, it's important to clarify שערי מדינת ישראל תמיד היו ויהיו פתוחים עבור כאלה שבחרו לעלות לישראל. That the gates of the state of Israel have always been and will always be open to those that choose to make aliyah and come to Israel. ולראיה מספר העולים שעלו לישראל בין החודשים מרץ עד דצמבר 2020. We can see this through what the amount of immigrants that came to Israel during the months between March and December of 2020. Bizman hitpartzut mageva corona, exactly at the time when the outbreak of the coronavirus was happening. Yesh litzayen, and we should also note, shal afak shayim, and even due to those difficulties, Sarat Aliyah v'Klita, the Minister of Aliyah and absorption. פעלה ללא לאות כדי להקל על העולים בכל שלבי העלייה. That she worked tirelessly to make it easier on the olim during every step of the Aliyah process. So that was the ministry of that was the response of the spokesperson of the Ministry of Tourism. We also have a response. I reached out to my friend Rabbi Josh Fast, the head of Nefesh B'Nefesh, the co-founder of Nefesh B'Nefesh, to ask his response. And he admittedly did not have time to read the entire article, but he did read parts of it. And his response was, number one, that Israel, to say that Israel abandoned American Jewry is an extreme exaggeration. We are here to protect our population, and that this is what we already said before. That the goal was obviously to protect, and our most important thought, and the as you pointed out, the most critical and most important the idea that any government should have is to the defense of their population. And number two, he says to say that we failed. And all the agencies were thinking. You should know that all the agencies were thinking out. I'm paraphrasing over here, out of the box, and we were very creative in trying to reduce some of the requirements. I think we mentioned this before, and ironically, a lot of the bottleneck came from the U.S. agencies shutdown. I think you mentioned this, that a lot of it had to do with the FBI and the passport authorities in the United States, not Israel. And this is not a person that, there is not a person that did not make Aliyah because of these challenges. It was difficult, just to note, he says, during this most difficult time of 2020, there were 3,167 olim that came to Israel despite all of the challenges. So to suggest that we were not working full-time around the clock in order to assist them is he thinks is an exaggeration and is not rightfully placed. Your response to those responses?
Let me just clarify. I did point out in my article that there are good players here, and I specifically mentioned the Sarat HaKlita. There are people like Nefesh B'Nefesh who do holy work. There's no question that there are a lot of people who did fabulous work. What I was saying is you need to reward those people. If they do all that work and the Israeli population doesn't say, wow, we value this. If this coming election, you don't ask whoever's running for office, what are your policies with regard to diaspora Jewry, that's where the issue is. Of course, people did phenomenal work. The question is that work rewarded? Is that work valued? And going forward, how much will Israelis ask their elected officials, it's not just about us. We have millions of Jews around the world. What are you going to do to care for them? So, yes, of course, there are people doing phenomenal work. And what's important is that people who value diaspora Jewry in Israel should make sure that kind of work is appreciated and demanded going forward.
That having been said, I'll quote another piece of your article. You wrote that, sure, there is always sympathy for 100 symbolic olim from India or Ethiopia, yet when there is a real need to help thousands of American and French Jews who are unable to make Aliyah this past year, the mass political will was just not there. This tokenism may be why Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs found more time for a special meeting about the fate of 65 Jews living in Bahrain, but did not show the same interest in the 650,000 Jews living in Florida. Politics are always local, and when there is a little political will, there is little political way. So again, I think that this is clearly pointing the finger at our representatives. By the way, when I'm speaking about these people, I'm obviously having in mind that they are our elected representatives, so they represent the people and our feelings generally. Hopefully that's the case, and that's why we have a democracy where we represent, we elect our representatives. And if they're saying that they're doing everything they can, and by the way, I have to mention one more idea that you mentioned, Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. this ministry, for those that are aware of history, did not exist for the majority of the 70-plus years of the State of Israel. This was a ministry that was started about two decades ago. And the fact that we started a ministry, which, by the way, I would be against because I think it's government waste, but the fact that we started a ministry called the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, I don't think there's any clear sign that we care for our Jews that are around the world, and our goal is to reunite them with our brothers here in our homeland. We only have 1 minute left. Your response.
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, important that it exists, and it's a beautiful thing. And like I said, the idea is to say, if you ever express an opinion on how it is that Jews elsewhere vote or are politically motivated or what their political opinions are, then make sure that upcoming election, you make that opinion heard, and that you show that this is an important thing to you, and you demand people who are running for office and say, listen, what are your plans to increase Aliyah? And I think, by the way, on that we agree 110%. You ask people who are incoming or running for office, what are your plans for increasing Aliyah? What are your plans for strengthening Jewish identity and Jewish education in the diaspora? And what are your plans for strengthening the bond between Am Yisrael? I think on that we for sure agree.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.